Darkfall, The Journal, is a ghost story. It's a game about a haunted hotel that's also a haunted train station. A game where you search for your vanished brother through the lives and memories of people that have been left to fester like the dust in an abandoned, boarded-up hotel room. It's a game with occult secrets, a missing little boy, an amateur astronomer discovering constellations that don't exist, 2 ghost-hunting college students who have disappeared without a trace, a gruesome local legend, memories of a world war, and the most annoying faucet sound effects I've ever heard in a video game. It's a very special horror game.
I can hear it. It's right outside the door. Whispering. It's whispering my name. It knows my name. I've got to open the door.
Darkfall, The Journal, is a point-and-click adventure horror game developed by Jonathan Boakes. It was first released in 2002 under the banner of XXV Productions, and then later again through the company he founded, Darkling Room. But as is often the case, the game was a labor of love made by one dude, when solo game development was an especially arcane art like augurs reading omens from the flight paths of birds, or dividing the future from a sacrificed beast's entrails. Boakes is a super fascinating guy. I first came across him when I was working on my Scratches video where he has a voice cameo. He's a computer game auteur with similar themes and styles he explores in his adventure games. He's made an impressive amount of similarly ghostly horror games through his company Darkling Room that I'm frankly dying to check out. Boakes-sama, as I'll be calling him, is clearly obsessed with the English ghost story, something him and I share. Now, I'm no Anglophile, but there are a few things the English do better than anyone else. 80s synth music, knife crime, only being the 9th best at a sport they created themselves, and writing ghost stories. Not campfire ghost stories, but literary ones that were meant to be published and read. As an enormous fan of the literary genre, I've completely fallen in love with the works of English writers like M.R. James, Robert Aikman, Walter D. Lemire, E.F. Benson, and so many more. There's nothing really like it. Obviously, I love American horror writers too, but when it comes to the pure ghost story, we frankly can't hold a candle to our snaggletooth forebears from across the drink. It's hard to say what makes the English ghost story so magical. I would argue that it's the attention given to atmosphere, the understated and subtle nature of the writing, and the emphasis put on being eerie and unsettling rather than in-your-face scary that make them special. I can't help but think Boakes-sama would agree, as many of his games carry the influence of this literary tradition proudly. For me, a game with the sensibilities of a classic English ghost story is as appealing as an infinite supply of Costco pizza slices. I think that's because those things that I mentioned I love about the stories, subtlety, atmosphere, emphasis on dread and eeriness, are something that work equally well in a video game as a short story. Let's begin, shall we? The game begins with a cutscene. It's April 29th.
Message 1.
If you're there, pick up. It's me. Your brother. I was hoping you were going to be in. I needed you to be in. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking you only have a phones when there's something wrong. Well, something is wrong. Very wrong.
We're listening to a phone recording our brother left us. He's in trouble, and so are 2 people he describes as ghost hunters.
I'm still in Dorset. I'm not the only one here. There's 2 students from Weymouth University. Polly and Nigel. Ghost hunters, would you believe? Well, I didn't believe. I do now. Ghost hunters. I think whatever they were hunting's found them. I think it's found me too. Please help. You're always good with things like this. Come to Dowerton Station. It's abandoned. I'll be waiting. I really need your help on this.
When the cutscene ends, we're in an abandoned train tunnel. We obviously took a train here, but it's not clear when or where we got off, and we're just kind of here. Even stranger, a child's voice is speaking to us.
Nah, you can't see me. You'll find out why later. But for now, I can see you, which is all that matters.
This is Timothy Pike, a boy who lived in the 1940s. A ghost, as you can tell.
You're from London, ain't ya? We came from London a couple of years ago, in 41.
I thought this was an interesting choice because it means that from the very beginning, we're to accept that ghosts are real in this world. It kills some of the suspense, but frankly, I appreciate the honesty. As we advance down the tunnel, we stumble across an old news article from 1947. It mentions 6 people disappearing at a hotel in Dowerton. Timothy tells us that our brother has joined them. He's the newest one.
One of them knows you. Your brother, ain't it? He's the new one. Only just arrived. He feels a bit confused. I was like that at first, but you get used to it.
Timothy serves as a guide for a little bit, but then sets us loose on our own, which I appreciated. I was worried for a second when I first played it that the whole game would have an 11-year-old boy describing everything we're seeing, but mercifully that wasn't the case. We can talk to him on the footbridge though if we're stuck. He says we can help him find his way home, but how?
Don't remember why. I don't remember much at all, not even the way home. But perhaps you can help me with that.
Now, personally, I was super excited that this game was taking place in a train station. As an enjoyer of Tylenol when I was a child, I'm obsessed with train travel and all its trappings. There's something inexplicably cozy and comforting about train stations, train cabins. Even the whistle of a train in the distance gives me a deep sense of peace. That said, Dowerton Station, where the voice of Timothy leads us, is not remotely comforting. It's been abandoned, left to rot in the dark. Peeling 40s era posters adorn the walls, and we find strange, almost occult-looking graffiti in the foul bathrooms. The odd noises we hear aren't helping either. We find notes from the former train station staff, detailing Timothy's disappearance and other odd happenings that sound like a haunting. So this place was already haunted back in the 40s. We also learned that the entire staff was let go and the train station decommissioned when people went missing at the hotel. What hotel though? See, Dowerton isn't just a train station, it's a railway hotel. This took some time for me to fully understand, as railway hotels aren't really a thing in the US. It's exactly what you imagine to be from the name, a hotel that's attached to a train station. Dowerton's hotel was actually built directly above the tracks, and we get a nice view of it from the footbridge. These railway hotels were incredibly popular in the United Kingdom and Ireland. They also caught on in Canada, who took this to a whole new level. The idea never really took off in America, as I said, but it seems immensely appealing. Think of traveling now. You have to get to the airport via car or public transit, which is usually past the outskirts of your city. Suffer through airport security and boarding, then figure out how to get from your destination airport, which is usually also far from the city, to wherever you're staying, in an unfamiliar city by taking a taxi or another train if they even have it. It makes you understand why these railway hotels exist, where you're staying right where your transportation ends. It sounds amazing to finish your long train journey in the room and bed where you're staying, which is usually in the city center, is literally steps from the platform. It sounds so convenient and comfortable. I'm sure there are problems too, and maybe I'm romanticizing the past, but I mean, no dangerous ideas or ideologies have ever come from idealizing the past, so it should be fine. Anyways, when we eventually stumble across the train station waiting room, we find where our brother Pete was staying, and the things he left behind. Pete is an architect who is visiting the abandoned railway hotel in the hopes of restoring it to serve as a new hotel. We find his PDA and get a lot more context. He describes two university students and amateur ghost hunters, Polly and Nigel, who are also staying in the abandoned hotel. They became friends, but he's pretty dismissive of them. Well, he is until Pete starts experiencing unexplainable things while working on surveying the hotel. Things suddenly end though, with Pete's last entry alluding to calling us to figure it all out. His modern stuff looks rather incongruous and almost pathetic in the ruined waiting room. It's finally time to enter the hotel. Right away, the atmosphere is incredibly eerie and stifling. It feels very lonely, but we're given constant signs that we're not truly alone.
Who are you?
The atmosphere is so genuinely unnerving, and the combination of subtle, creepy sound and the visuals made me look over my shoulder frequently when playing. That said, despite the creepy noises, it still always felt subtle, like the hotel is playing a long game to slowly break you. This is one of the games that most made me feel like I was in a space that was actually haunted, like vague but weakened forces were dwelling here and trying to push me out. It's not necessarily malignant, but you feel that something is always happening just off the corner of the frame. There's some choreographed scares, though not jump scares, which are fun, but the game's scare factor is much more powerful when you were just poking around in the dark. It gives that sense of growing dread and unease that I described as loving in English ghost stories. I mean, the atmosphere is so good, I literally got jump scared by the carving on the back of a door. And believe it or not, this game is based on a real-life ghost story. Well, a real-life story that feels like a ghost story. See, in January 2000, days after avoiding the global catastrophe of Y2K, Johnny Boakes was doing some nighttime exploring in Dorset. He actually ran across the skeleton of an abandoned train station in the wilderness. It was a railway hotel, just like the one in the game. Wandering through the abandoned grounds and peeking through windows into still and empty rooms, Boakes somehow felt like the place was trying to tell him its story. He got the idea to write a short story based around the abandoned hotel, which later became the Darkfall game. This is all fascinating, but remember how I said it feels like a ghost story? See, when Boakes came back a few months later to get more inspiration, the hotel was gone, razed, disappeared forever, like it never existed. Now in this case, the ruins were cleared for a new housing development, but I imagine there were a few moments where Boakes-sama wondered if the hotel had been destroyed long before. If the abandoned hotel he found had appeared to him that night from the past, a ghost, a memory begging to be seen just once more. Anyways, back to the game. There's 3 floors of guest rooms and each floor is a different vibe. The third feels the safest and is oddly the most well preserved, with the second and first being much more menacing. Some rooms are completely dilapidated and vandalized, but some are in great shape and feel even cozy. It feels like time hit certain rooms harder than others. The majority of the game is looking through these rooms and trying to find hints of what happened, why the hotel was abandoned, and why your brother and the 2 ghost hunters disappeared. There is a ton of reading in this game, which I loved, but might turn some people off. None of the notes are voiced, which is a good thing for me, as I have the patience of a child relative that you'd promise you'd do something with and are now vainly hoping he'll forget on his own. We get all these character names, and it takes a while to assign the significance to each, but we have to figure out who they are and their relation to one another. I know I said the game is a ghost story, but it also feels like an epistolatory novel. And like a good epistolatory novel, Boakes-sama does a good job of giving each character their own distinct voice, whether it's a letter, a diary entry, or just a short note to a coworker. I got bogged down by all the characters initially, but when I took my time to remember names and let the story unfold, it all became clear. Another cool thing is because you're just kind of turned loose to rifle through the hotel like a little freak, you come to different notes and characters in almost a random order, which definitely means each player's experience of the game's story will unfold in a different way. As you look through Dead People's Refuse, a few things becomes clear. On April 29th, 1947, the hotel staff held a music night event in the bar. The morning after, everyone in the hotel, all staff and guests, mysteriously disappeared, causing the hotel to shut down. Almost everything in the hotel is preserved from that morning, like a time capsule. Characters slowly start to emerge from the notes you find. The most important include Edith and Betty Penfold, a widow and her teenage daughter who ran and managed the hotel. The other is the hotel's owner, George Crabtree, who lived in the hotel like a guest. Calling Crabtree an eccentric is putting it lightly. He was from a local noble family and was obsessed with alchemy, ghost hunting, magic lanterns, and occultation. That said, he seems eccentric in a friendly way, less Aleister Crowley and more fat-era Orson Welles in a champagne commercial.
Ah, the French champagne.
Regardless, it becomes increasingly clear that he was directly involved in whatever caused the people at the hotel to disappear, and was even blamed for their disappearance. Police suggest he murdered them, though no signs of violence or dead bodies were ever found, and everything we learn about Crabtree makes him seem like a nice dude. The hotel weirdness goes back even further, though. See, there's a popular story that 2 young soldiers in the English Civil War found shelter in the basement of the building when it served as an inn. One was heavily wounded, and eventually the other lost their courage and deserted. When Cromwell's men came to the inn, the wounded man had disappeared without a trace. There's other cool characters too, like an astronomer who stayed at the hotel and is trying to restart the constellations under a new system and has found a new constellation in the sky that shouldn't exist. There's a beautiful but very unpleasant actress taking refuge here after debuting in a play that was so badly received she was literally forced out of London and is now serving as a royal terror in the small hotel. Anyways, as we violate the privacy of the dead, now might be a good time to talk about the visuals. For a game from 2002, it really looks like a game from 2002. The 3D rendered frames and tableaus totally scratched a nostalgic itch in my brain. In fact, for a game developed by one dude that started in 2000, this is genuinely impressive. The art direction is maybe less strong than in something like Scratches, but again, the game is older and resources were more limited. I do find the majority of the game to be very visually interesting, and there's some really cool moments, especially with lights and shadows. The effect of the stained glass in the hotel bar especially stood out to me as impressive. You also find this super chunky, colorful, early 2000s piece of technology around the hotel from your brother and the Ghost Hunters, which I found to be such a charming visual divergence from the 1940s backgrounds. The sound design is such a mixed bag, because the subtle use of noises like footsteps, hushed voices, and even trains in the distance is what makes the atmosphere so incredible. In a game without any scary visuals per se, the scares and sense of dread is fully carried by the soundscapes. Some sound effects are sort of annoying, and the voice acting is mostly bad, but thankfully there's little of it. More though, the music is pretty weak. Some of it is okay, but some of the floors don't even have music, more just like a looping, annoying noise you have to hear over and over. It's frustrating because there are a few moments where you get to play these trip-hop tracks that I think Boakes-sama made, and they're genuinely so good in my opinion. Like, I'm not sure how, but I would so much rather Boakes-sama try to implement these kinds of songs into the music at large. Sure, it doesn't fit the setting and it would be hard to make it work, but it would be a cool and creative risk. How about the actual gameplay? Like other adventure games of its time, you're just moving through mostly static frames. The puzzles themselves are hard to classify. Some were tough, some were easy, some were frustrating, but some were actually really satisfying. Like Nancy Drew games, they're less based around items and more around logic, which I'll always appreciate. When I did get stuck, it was usually because I didn't realize you could inspect something even closer. As far as moon logic goes, I'd say it's a 5 out of 10. I've heard people complain about the puzzles being difficult and esoteric in the series, so I was expecting the worst, but I found most of them to be quite fun. You might need a bit of general knowledge, like how to read music, and some require lucky guesses, but again, I was never too frustrated. When I was stuck and finally figured out how to solve a puzzle, my response was less, how am I supposed to know that? And more, how come I didn't think of that? Which is a good sign. I will say you need to be writing stuff down in a notebook to solve the puzzles, as a lot involve memorizing certain patterns and words. Without it, you will get mad and burn out, so have your pen and notebook at the ready. Or you could just, I don't know, take pictures of the screen on your phone, but where's the fun in that? That's the adventure game equivalent of giving someone cash for their birthday instead of buying them a gift you think they'll like. Yeah, it's easier and you get the same result, but where's the care? Now, as you play the game, you realize that Boakes-sama is obsessed with two things: 40s memorabilia and ghost hunting. For the former, you could tell this through the extensive use of 1940s ads and posters that are included just to strengthen the atmosphere and setting. The same is true for the 1940s interior design and decor. It's not a historic period that I'm particularly interested in, but I'm certainly not against it. I think it's a decade that's a much bigger part of the British zeitgeist than in America, which getting your cities blown to hell at night by fighter pilots from across the channel will do that. I'll also always respect when designers add real pieces of art or advertising to their games for no other reason than improving the vibe. I also feel similar about the game's ghost hunting obsession. After all, two of the missing characters, Polly and Nigel, were amateur ghost hunters, and you pick up and use some of their ghost hunting gear as you go. Some of this is classic stuff like Ouija boards, and some is more pseudoscientific modern things you've seen on TV, like EMF readers, spirit photography, and these, ghost goggles. However, if this stuff annoys you, you really don't have to engage with it. Personally, I'm not crazy about ghost hunting. I used to love ghost hunting shows when I was a kid until I realized, hey, isn't it an odd coincidence that in basically every episode they obtain evidence that should turn the scientific world on its head, but nothing ever comes of it?
I have a great desire to know the unknowable, to see the unseeable, to understand paralegal activity, aka ghosts.
Once I realized how hokey it is, my interest kind of wore off.
Was this spirit being a smartass?
Even past the fakeness, ghost hunting just isn't that interesting to me. I think because it takes a scientific, well, not actually scientific, but you know what I mean, but a scientific approach to a phenomenon that is so interesting and captivating because of how illogical and unexplainable it is. All the little gadgets and gizmos take the magic out of what makes ghosts scary. It's like taking a painting that elicits an emotional reaction and arguing that the reason it affects you is because of the brands of brushes and paint the artist used. That said, even if I'm not interested in ghost hunting, do I want to play as one in a game? Hell yeah, I'll gladly take on the persona of a ghost hunter in a universe where ghosts definitively exist. It's like, no, I'm not particularly interested in the ins and outs of power washing, but I'll play 70 hours of a game where I can pretend to be one. Anyways, here's where I'll warn you about spoilers. If you're enjoying the video, I'd love if you subscribed. Before the end of the year, I'd love to get 15k subs. Also, if you really like the video, you can donate to the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description to directly support me, but no pressure. Anyways, skip to the time on screen for no spoilers. As we solve puzzles or attempt to solve puzzles, we come across these little scraps of paper that have these runic symbols written on them. We know they're important because of a small animation that plays, but why? Eventually in Edith, the old manager's room, we get a little message from her ghost giving us more information.
Are you the one carrying on George's work? If so, you should know that there are 12 of those weird symbols. I had one, Betty had one, the guests had one each too.
We learn that the runes aren't actually on paper but vellum, animal skin. George Crabtree, the eccentric hotel owner, gave one to each of the guests and workers the night everyone went missing. The main point of the game is tracking all of these down by solving puzzles, as well as figuring out each symbol's name. Again, this is why you need the notebook. As I said, each of these puzzles are tied with a specific person. But what exactly are the symbols and why do they have names? This seems related to a letter from the British Museum you find in Crabtree's stuff that mentions the symbols in Neolithic cave paintings from a cave on a Scottish island. We know Crabtree was interested in magic and alchemy, but why was he giving these to the people in the hotel? And who is this it that Edith speaks of?
It knows what you're doing, you'll have to be careful.
It's clear the ghosts of the disappearing guests aren't the only entities here in the hotel with us. There's something else that feels much more malevolent. We also occasionally get phone calls where disembodied voices are begging us to free them.
You can help us. Help us.
In the attic, we can have a Ouija conversation with the spirit that wants us to free them from darkness. We learn a lot more when we finally get access to a locked room that the ghost hunters Polly and Nigel were using as their base. The room was such a fun change of pace from the haunted 40s hotel with all the photos, takeout menus, ghost hunting gear, and beautifully Y2K computers. I loved this because due to the graphics, the game is already so nostalgic, but now not only do you have the nostalgia of the graphics, but also the nostalgia of the technology and computer interfaces we once enjoyed these types of games on. It's very charming and kind of meta, like a museum in a museum. Anyways, we can go on Polly and Nigel's computers and play around. There's a weather app, music player, and even a browser where we can go to early 2000s sites about unexplained mysteries and even a fortune teller. Like, there's even a recording of a BBC interview that the fictional character of Polly had where she talks about ghost hunting as a career. Boakes did not need to include all this, but I'm so glad he did. We can also enjoy the fruits of the ghost hunter's labor, looking at spooky photos and listening to EVP recordings of ghostly voices, including the dead English Civil War soldier whose spirit is in the basement.
No, they won't find us, unless they spy my blood.
Eventually, we can also get access to Polly's locked computer, where she has a journal of the events in the hotel. Now, there's so much here, and it's all very fun to read and well written, but in the interest of time, I'll pick out the important details. We learned that another investigator in the 1980s also went mysteriously missing from the hotel. The notes start out pretty chipper and excited as the two get some convincing evidence, but become more melancholy and scared. Polly talks about a darkness she experiences, a shadow, an entity that sounds like 1,000 voices whispering, and it knows her name. Later, Nigel finds evidence in the basement of a much more ancient building. But right after, a journal entry tells us that Nigel let something out, something that is haunting Polly, toying with her as it closes in. Cornered in her room, she leaves, vowing to save Nigel and our brother Pete before the journal abruptly ends. The last note is from April 29th, the same day in 1947 everyone in the hotel went missing. Did you enjoy that exposition dump? Good, because there's another one starting right now. Anyways, we eventually get access to George Crabtree's locked room. This is the hotel owner who is giving everyone the runes and who the disappearance is blamed on. In the locked room, we get a bigger sense of his interests here, like archaeology and magic lantern slides and, photography? Anyways, it seems like Polly and Nigel were carrying on his footsteps as he was also an amateur ghost hunter, proving the hotel was considered haunted long before the 1947 disappearance. We learn a lot from Crabtree's diary. This is the journal of the game's title. See, Crabtree was best friends with a much younger man, Arthur, who was an artist that also lived in the hotel. While investigating the building, Arthur and Crabtree learn that the hotel was built on the site of a building from the Middle Ages. Then, they find an even older and deeper chamber that gives Crabtree the heebie-jeebies. There, they accidentally awaken some evil force, the same one Nigel did, and release it. A godless power, Crabtree calls it, that speaks with the whisper of 1,000 voices. A god of the dead. He calls it the Darkfall. And now it's in the hotel, along with the thousands of dead souls it's absorbed. Its presence torments Crabtree and Arthur, forcing them to search for some method to banish it. While investigating the ancient chambers, they find an incantation of runes written on vellum. This was the ancient magic language used by whatever civilization or race first sealed the Darkfall in the basement. Believing this is the way to banish the creature, Crabtree sets out to trying to find the right order and the pronunciation of each rune. Crabtree is able to figure it out, but Arthur enlists in World War II and is soon killed in action, sending Crabtree into a black depression, during which he does nothing to defeat the Darkfall. Eventually, he resolves to master the incantation and imprison it, but it starts playing with his mind, causing him to forget lines of the incantation. This is what finally drives him to give scraps of the incantation to each of the hotel's inhabitants, in hopes it will be safe with them. The diary ends right before the fateful music night. It's clear, though, that Crabtree's ritual wasn't a success. So, we've learned a lot. One, there is a larger malevolent force in the hotel, the godlike spirit Darkfall, that is a keeper of dead souls that ravenously looks for more. As a main villain, it's alright. A bit vague, certainly. There's other notes that associate it with the Scandinavian pagan deity Hel, the ruler of the underworld. This is a bit interesting. There were Vikings in southern England, after all. Crabtree wonders if Hel stopped being content with ruling the dead and sought to add to its subjects from among the living. Anyways, we have to continue Crabtree's quest of sealing it up and freeing those that it's consumed, who aren't only the hotel guests and our brother, but presumably poor souls that found their way to the spot for thousands and thousands of years. The relationship between Crabtree and Arthur is interesting. Crabtree's entries where he learns of his death is very touching, as are the passages where he reflects on his loss. They were clearly incredibly close. Were they a thing, though? Some of the notes certainly read like that. Others read more like they had a father-son relationship and Crabtree was just protective. After all, Crabtree does have photos of naked women tucked away, but their relationship seems incredibly close and intimate. I'm not sure. Come to your own conclusions. I'm no expert with this stuff. Just saying, if you ship Arthur and Crabtree, there's certainly a basis for that. Anyways, now our mission is clear. Complete the rest of the puzzles to find all of the 12 symbols. Then, memorize each of the symbols, learn their names, and learn the proper order they should be set in. We find a chamber underneath the garage, which incidentally is one of the creepiest locations in the game, that shows the proper order the symbols should be in. I found this part of the game to be honestly quite fun. The ghosts aren't really scary anymore, especially since we've now learned that they're just unfortunate trapped spirits, but the sense of completion you get from finding each new symbol made the gameplay satisfying. Along the way, we find the hidden chamber Crabtree and Arthur explored. It has a cool vibe. It feels like we're entering this arcane Stone Age world. We find another note from Crabtree where he theorizes about who the people who built the tunnel and potentially worshipped the Darkfall were. Were they even human? I don't know. As I said, I don't find the monster particularly interesting due to how one-note it is, so it's hard to get myself interested by the ancient aliens notes. That said, I definitely do like the story beat about the hotel being built on an ancient magical site. It's like the built on an ancient Indian burial ground trope, but less problematic. Instead, it's an English building built on an ancient English burial ground. Sort of like building a Tesco's on top of a Woolworths or something like that. I just don't find the evil entity too engaging. It's an evil death god with a bunch of souls trapped inside. That's basically just Gravelord Nito. More on the Darkfall later, though. What is engaging is this note we find while we check off the runes from our checklist. Crabtree left it behind while he was doing his best to complete the ritual on that last night, despite the Darkfall tempting and mocking him. He speaks directly with us, the player. He tells us it's obvious he'll fail, otherwise he wouldn't need us, otherwise he wouldn't be leaving these notes behind. He theorizes a missing loved one brought us here and tells us that his thoughts are with us. Although he wonders vainly if his family even misses him, he hopes that his body is rotting, forgotten underground, because otherwise, it has him. This is when it really hit home how much suffering the dead souls that we've come to know and like from what they left behind are in. The suffering our brother and Polly and Nigel and God knows how many else are in. All Crabtree wants is to be forgotten by the living, to be allowed to die, to be with Arthur maybe. I really wanted to mention this note because it could be passed by quickly, but I found it to be some of the most touching writing I've encountered in a game like this. If rescuing our brother wasn't motivation enough, then this is. Anyways, once we've memorized all the words of the incantation, it's time to seal the Darkfall up in its sanctum. We pass a few esoteric trials, then find the belly of the beast. A cold stone chamber with columns enmeshed with dead souls, and a beam of putrid green light pumping into the hotel. Recite the words and seal it up for good.
Good evening. Bet you're staying there tonight.
You did it. I knew you could. I can go home now. Well, you know what I mean. You stopped the Darkfall spreading. It's trapped again, where it belongs. You may as well leave too. There's nothing here for you now. Time you had a rest, I think. One last thing though. Things don't have to turn out as they did. You'll find out what I mean soon. Bye.
Message 1.
Hello, it's me, your brother. I've got something important to tell you. Well, I'll have to tell you now. I've completely forgotten. Well, it can't have been that important after all. I'm going to be back in a couple of days anyway. The station and hotel redevelopment for the Crabtree estate's gone, well, better than planned. No surprises. When I get back, I think I owe you a drink or two. Haven't seen you for a while. Been neglecting you. Okay, I'll see you when I get back. Bye.
So we freed the captured souls, but also reversed all the events that the Darkfall had a part in? But why was the hotel ever abandoned then? Why was our brother ever there? Honestly, let's just take it on face value because it hurts my head trying to understand it. As the ending goes, it's not my favorite, but hey, at least the main story's resolved and we feel like we accomplished something great. Anyways, I mentioned Boakes' ghost story that inspired the game. Let's talk about a few more ghost stories. M.R. James is a ghost story writer who I've talked about in other videos and who I absolutely adore. He was a historian and academic by trade, but is remembered for his side job of writing ghost stories. Monty's stories are awesome. In most of them, an over-inquisitive person, usually an academic, pokes their nose into something they shouldn't and comes face to face with some unknowable evil force. But besides his cool plots, he was a master of narrative pace and subtle humor and mounting dread and crafting atmosphere without ever being overwordy. Boakes loves him too. After all, he has Crabtree own a copy of Monty's stories. Past that, I was clued in when Crabtree describes himself as casting the runes. This is obviously a reference to one of James's most famous stories, Casting the Runes. It's honestly not one of my favorites, but it's still a very fun story. In it, a black magic practitioner named Carswell deals with his enemies, in this case the critics of his writing, by giving them scraps of paper with runes on them. The recipient of the runes then gets hunted down by something, a demon or ghost or spirit, that does away with them in a particularly nasty way. At the end of the story, one of his would-be victims slipped the runes back to Carswell, who gets a taste of his own medicine. Darkfall subverts this plot device in a cool way. Crabtree also gives people scraps with runes on them, but here they're meant to save the person rather than spell their doom. There are other references too. Crabtree, like Carswell, is a magic lantern aficionado, and one of the names of the runes has this very distinctive name of Cars, likely reference to the villain of the story's name. You get this fairly early, and this was the first clue I had of the influence. Although I think it's awesome that this game was partly inspired by an M.R. James story, it leads me to my biggest gripe with the game, the final villain. One of the many things I love about James's stories is how unique and memorable the ghosts and monsters in them are. Like an "Oh Whistle and I'll Come to You," where the ghost is this mysterious spirit that the Templars brought back from the Middle East, that takes the form of animated linens and moves in this incredibly odd and disturbing way. Or in Count Magnus, where the villain is the ghost of a dead sorcerer and his demonic, octopus-like familiar. There's countless more I love and can name. The Darkfall just kind of, pardon the pun, falls flat compared to these. I think the worst part is that it's not that bad. Like, a God of Death is interesting, but you have to give me more. What if the Darkfall was, I don't know, the ghost of some ancient dead British chieftain, or maybe summoned by a druid sorcerer that ultimately couldn't control it? Also, all the ghosts haunting the hotel are ultimately completely harmless, and most of them are sympathetic. Even the ghost of the mean London actress and the female bank robber. What if one of the ghosts was evil? What if it was serving the Darkfall or something? That would be a lot more threatening to me. I love the M.R. James influence in the game, but wish Boakes took a page out of Monty's book for the villain. There's another big influence to mention too. Another ghost story, but this time an old TV show. In the early 80s, there was this British sci-fi series called Sapphire and Steel. It's sort of like classic Doctor Who. In it, these two paranormal investigators, who are themselves supernatural beings, Sapphire and Steel, go on adventures to heal rifts in time. In the second season of the show, they go to a haunted railway hotel. And the set looks oddly familiar, down to specific patterns on the wall. The outside train station, buffet room, lobby, and so many other locations in Darkfall are directly lifted from the show. Even this view of the station from the window is directly lifted, and this cute plaid thermos. I kind of felt like I was going crazy when I was watching it, because why are these 80s actors walking around in the game I just played? And the plot is literally about lost souls kept captive in the hotel by a malignant deity of pure darkness. Honestly, at first I wish I hadn't watched the show, because oddly enough it felt like it cheapened the game. So much of the amazing setting from the game was just directly lifted from the show. But the more I thought, I realized I was being unfair. After all, game designers need to be inspired by something for their setting. I doubt there's many game locations that are just conjured from thin air. Plus, putting the setting into a game and crafting the atmosphere took an immense amount of work and creativity. Yeah, I can see this setting on TV, but Darkfall gave me the chance to exist in it. As I said, the original railway station was razed. Boakes had to look for inspiration somewhere. That said, the plot is extremely similar as well, so take from that what you will. But again, it's not like Boakes was trying to keep it secret. I only know about it because he literally mentioned the show on the blog post where he talks about the game's inspiration. Regardless, I have a new show to watch now.
Come on, you want to see your ghost again?
Yes.
You want to make contact with him?
Of course.
Well, let's waken the dead, shall we?
Reading that all back, I realize I'm criticizing the game a lot. Make no mistake, I loved this game. I thought it was fucking awesome. I wish I had half the talent and discipline and ambition of Jonathan Boakes to make such an incredibly atmospheric adventure game in the earliest of the early 2000s. I feel like because I loved it so much, I'm entitled to point out things that would make it even better. I feel like Tyra Banks. When your mother yells at you like this, it's because she loves you. And yeah, there are critiques, but so many things this game does right. I love how it conjured a truly haunted atmosphere. I loved how lived in and realized the setting is, to the extent you could even smell the dust and aged wood and charcoal in these rooms. Even if the larger story Darkfall tells didn't necessarily wow me, the smaller stories it contains are fantastic. The characters are so lovingly crafted and well realized, and the sheer amount of writing and lore and background history Boakes gave them is amazing. And again, the fucking atmosphere. I harp on atmosphere so much in these videos, but the strength of the atmosphere of this game that Jonathan Boakes summoned using macromedia while working as a sushi chef is almost like black magic. I'm so glad Boakes has so many more horror adventure games I can play. I don't know, I haven't in the past ever covered an entire series, but maybe I will for Darkfall. And regardless, there'll be another video about a Darkling Room game on this channel before the end of the year. Mark my words. Darkfall feels like one of those English ghost stories I love so much in video game form. But it's so much more. It's an epistolatory novel, an essential example of the classic point-and-click genre, a game that genuinely scared me. It was the perfect game to play in October, especially where I live, where the weather went from 80 degrees to 45 in like half a week. Also, I was so excited to talk about English ghost stories that I decided to make a list of my favorite. I left a link to it in the description, so please check it out if you're interested. All of the stories on it have the Snuggler seal of approval. Well, that's all for today. Thank you so much for your time, dear viewer. I wish you all the good fortune in the world. I remain your faithful Snuggler.